dream, I got a dream that comes from the heart of the heartland.
People throughout the heartland have a dream shared by 12,000 competitors and over 500,000 spectators. A dream that begins at the foot of skyscrapers and ends 26 grueling miles later. For some, the dream is to win. For most, the dream is to finish.
10 seconds.
Today, the best runners in the world are in Chicago.
4, 3,
and the rest of the world
1.
is watching.
I know all of my friends who are running are going to take full advantage of that. The luck of the draw here.
Well, we're known to be lucky in this city. We're lucky to have this back this year. 30 seconds away from the start of the race at the Daily Center now. 26.2. That's a long way to go between now and what will it be, 11:15 or so?
Well, pretty close. Maybe, yeah, I guess it will be, because it's going to start at 5 or 6 after 9, so.
Okay, 10 seconds. Here we go.
I always love the overhead shots because you see thousands of people acting as one, moving, and any marathon, it's just incredible to see that.
The other thing that always strikes me during a marathon is the different stories. I mean, every single person out there has a story about why they started running, why they're running this race, the great training runs, the hard training runs that they've had, the people that they've met along the way. They're all different sizes and shapes and ages and occupations, and it's a wonderful coming together. These people know how to start slowly.
Quite a contrast between the folks who are back there in the pack waiting to start running and these guys who are out front.
I always love this. These are the guys that want to get on television. They won't be up near the front at the end.
It's actually good to have them there in a race like this because there is a little bit of a north wind. And when you get warmed up today, these guys go out and take the pressure off. You don't have to worry about leading because you've got these guys that want to lead for the first mile or two, and then you'll see them drop off on a side street at about 3 miles.
There's Don Janicki, who was last in 1987 on the World Championship team. He's wearing number 15, and I believe he's going to be one of the pace setters today.
He's taking it off. I think where you have a field that's so equal in talent, they're looking for a very good race, but they want to control the pace to a point where these guys have a chance to really run the second half. And by having a couple of pace setters go out there, take them out fast, but not so fast that it's going to destroy the field. Get them to halfway, get them going, running well, and then let them just scream home.
Well, we're up to mile 2 here, and you can see that things are already really spreading out. You've got, it looks like thousands of people back behind this opening pack.
It looks to me, we don't have the exact mile splits, but they're running a very good pace. Those are the two designated rabbits in this race. It always seems funny to call them a rabbit in a race this long. You tend to think of that in a mile race, but that's really what they are. They are there to set the pace for the men's race and to do a lot of the work in the first half. So everybody else is just settling in. They just want to relax, settle into the pace, take it easy. There are a few people up there for the glory of getting on television, but they'll drop back soon enough.
All right, well, as we watch the winners pass the 2-mile mark, let's send it over to Tim Weigel, who has been observing all this from the starting line at the Daily Plaza. Tim?
Thank you very much. Along with number 15, Don Janicki. So they're doing their job. They're doing it real well. All the pretenders are sort of out of the way, and the race is on. And they're running right down Michigan Avenue, the magnificent mile. Let's take a look at the course that these runners will be traversing. As you probably figured out, they began at the Daily Plaza, dual start, down Clark Street and then Dearborn Street. They took the turn as they reached up to Clark and North Avenue, and then they turned down Michigan Avenue, down Lakeshore Drive eventually. They're going to take a cut over west around Comiskey Park at 35th Street, through Chinatown, then over on the west side through Little Italy, then bending back up along Halsted Street and then Wells, maybe 17 miles at that point, and then on up, as you see, all the way up toward Montrose, and then they'll bend back down Lakeshore Drive and finish over here on Cannon, 26.2 miles. And Tony, this is a little unusual for world-class courses in that it bends around a lot, goes through the neighborhoods trying to duplicate New York. But New York and Boston, the two big names in American marathons, are a straight shot, 26.2 miles point to point, correct?
Greg Meyer could talk about it because he's won Boston back in '83, but it's a point-to-point course. New York is point-to-point as well. It's got a few turns in it, but not nearly as many as Chicago. But Chicago, on the other hand, is much faster because of the dead flat nature of it. Boston and New York both have hills and undulations, and because of that, it's a little bit more difficult course. Here in Chicago, it's the third fastest course on average of top 10 times. It's the third fastest course in the world, and I think if you took the top 10 times of the men finishing in this race over the history, they've run 2 hours, 8 minutes, and 50 seconds on average for the top 10 guys. That's how fast it is.
Nancy and Greg just said they'd rather be out here where the excitement is.
They say that. That's.
They can say that now at 9:15 or 9:20 in the morning. Wait till it gets a few hours into this stuff. But it really is a pretty pleasant day. And that's Manny Matias, number 26, who's also up there among the leaders as they're down around Michigan Avenue, heading for Jackson Street. And as this race continues, so will our coverage. We'll take a short time out and be back just after this. Of who's who in the business.
If we go back to 1975 at the Boston Marathon, one of the biggest names the sport's ever created, Bill Rogers, was not even known as Bill Rogers back then. He was known as Will Rogers, which he never called himself. His parents never called him. But the press liked it, so they used Will Rogers. Well, his personal best coming into Boston 75 was 2:19, and he ran a 2:09. And all of a sudden now here's the guy that's Bill Rogers, who has become the king of the roads over the running boom period. Well, of course, in 1984 here in Chicago, who ever heard of Steve Jones? Steve Jones is now one of the most celebrated athletes in the sport. World record holder here at the Chicago Marathon, now the third fastest marathoner in history. Yeah, they keep coming up. They keep coming up, and there's no telling who will emerge from this pack. Now, I don't think we got somebody who's going to emerge into a super 2:07, 2:08 type of marathon, although we could easily be proven wrong. But somebody's going to run 2:09 today. That's the feeling I got. Somebody's going to run 2:09, which is probably somebody's going to run a personal best. A lot of people are going to probably run personal best times in this race. That's why they're here. And with the sort of visibility that the marathon in Chicago gets internationally, that name will then jump right up on that skyline to somebody who will be able to command big appearance fees in their next marathons.
Well, that's just, you're talking about appearance fees. That's just another indication of how far this sport has come. There's a lot of prize money at stake here. The winning runner could tote home $2.
Is from Mexico, and he's been running strong ever since he got out of the gate.
Ever since he got out of bed, I believe is when he started running strong. He along with most of the Mexicans, they train as a national team. They have a Polish national coach, as he has seemed to have made slightly a break at 1 hour, 28 minutes, and 40 seconds into it, and that's interesting. He's, again, in his early 20s. He ran 2:13 at the Los Angeles Marathon in his first serious marathon. He was in 7th place, but said, I really wasn't in very good shape whatsoever. So I think I can run much better in Chicago than I did there. He's what's referred to as he loves to race. I mean, this guy races constantly, and he'll run a 15-kilometer race one day, a half marathon the next day. He just loves to go race. Most of the Mexicans train at a place at about 10,000 feet altitude called, it's the Forest of the Lions, Desiertos de Leones. And it's at 10,000 feet altitude, so coming down to sea level at Chicago, they just going to feel like there's more oxygen in the air. They can deliver more oxygen-rich blood to their working muscle groups. And he's looking great.
He just looked like he turned on North Avenue there. He'll be heading west now over toward Larrabee as he's crossed the 18-mile mark.
And the battle has been joined. And this guy says, I'm going to try to take this to the wire. The thing is, he's young, and this is a long way out. Greg, this is a long way out for somebody to be making a break, don't you think?
It really is. What is this, about 15 miles?
Well,
15,
no, they're
17 miles?
17 miles, 17 and a half.
Going up on the
really
18-mile. He just crossed the 18-mile mark, I believe.
The one thing you do know about this is him making a move like that is eliminating some people from the race. You saw Kerp, and I don't know who the other person is, fall off the back of the pack. I think the 3 guys that he has to watch are right behind him again because they're still stalking as a group. The other 2 are going the other way.
That's his Jesus Valdez, who's his countryman. That's also Tolstikov and Richard Katang.
And Binns is off it too. Plus, you have to remember, these guys have been running fast, faster than they ever have before. It could be just let this guy go. He's not going to make it. Binns is smart. These other guys have been in races before. They might be saying to themselves, it's too soon. We don't need to do this now. We've been running fast enough.
But he really thinks this is a 10K race from this point on. It looks like a 10K sort of race pace, doesn't it?
It sure does. He's working hard, but he looks good. You know, everything looks. It's too early to tell. Give him 5 more minutes to see if he holds up this kind of surge. If he doesn't, then I think somebody has a chance to reel him in. But for my money, it seems like he's gone a little bit too early.
Well, that's the impetuousness of youth, isn't it?
Well, the other thing is you always want to, when you make a move in a marathon, you want it to be decisive without being overly aggressive this early on. This is taking a lot of energy to make a move this aggressive. And when he gets to 23, 24 miles, we saw it in the Olympic marathon, we thought that it had been broken wide open, and sure enough, it didn't quite work out that way for Ahmed Saleh because he did the same sort of thing. He got very, very aggressive, put a good surge on, thought he was dropping them, and wham, everything came down around him.
You know what he also did?
Fast, and I think he's trying to prove that right here. So I think he has the confidence. I just hope he knows what he's doing this early in the race.
It was a 4:52 18th mile, as a matter of fact, and before that it was a 4:56. So at this stage of the race going north, they're going to hit the wind in their face. So it's not the same as the early mile 4:52s. This is a wind in your face 4:56, 4:52, and that has broken this race open. We have more on this 5'9", 125-pound 20-year-old out of Mexico City. As I said, 2:13.14 in 88 at Los Angeles, 7th place. He's run other marathons in Mexico, but the courses aren't as accurately measured. It's just he is, of course, Rich Castro, our friend who handles the Mexican runner, says, well, he's got a problem with pace and he goes out too hard. He had 6 countrymen to run with in a pack in Los Angeles. Here, he doesn't have that many people around him to hold him back. And the early pace is what Rich, I think, was referring to, but we might see this impetuousness in pace, not at the beginning, but at the 30-kilometer mark and on. And now the question is, can he take this to the wire? And history of this event, not just the Chicago Marathon, but the history of marathoning tells you that strong a move, you pay a penalty for later on.
Greg, you were saying this is an American flaw primarily. I mean, weren't you saying that the American runners are the impatient ones?
Well, early to go, those last miles just seem like they take forever. And you saw one quick look back over his shoulder already. It's possible he has the fitness to overcome this sort of impetuous little move that he's, not a little move, major move that he's made. But it's a gamble. But it's what makes it interesting. It makes it fun to watch.
Yeah, that's why they have races and they don't give things out to the, they don't give prizes and trophies out before the race. They make people actually go out there and earn that stuff. Again, Tim, you're bringing up the question of the wall at 22 miles or 20 to 22 miles. Athletes only have so much glycogen as their primary fuel source stored in their body. Usually it comes out as 1 hour and 50 minutes, 50, 1 hour, 50 minutes of glycogen in most people's bodies. So the marathon, even for the top people, are going to take over 2 hours. So you have to start
minutes away.
You have to start developing the ability to transfer over from primary fuel to less high octane fuel, and that the people that do that well are the people that do their long runs every Sunday.
Well, he's still on Larrabee around the 19-mile mark. And
stroking right along.
Yes, he's eventually going to jog over on Fullerton, and then he'll be heading up Racine, and then he's going flush into the wind for at least 2.5 miles before he's able to turn east and then head for home.
Let me just tell you that it's Richard Katang, Jesus Valdez from Mexico, and Yakov Tolstikov prowling in the distance, not out of this by any means.
Absolutely not. We're not out of it either. We've got lots of race coverage still to come. We're going to take a brief timeout and then be right back.
.209.44.8, but in marathon you always round up, so they both officially got 209.45s, one of the closest finishes in history.
Well, and here is our leader today.
This is it's great to see somebody new come to the fore and win a major race. The man's going to make $50,000 because he certainly didn't get an appearance fee to come here. Alejandro Cruz was a nobody coming into this. He was a good, solid 7th place finish and a 2:13 personal best. Certainly doesn't have to pay for his entry fee, but other than that, he was just another one of the Mexican contingent of 5 or 6 or 8 men, actually, who came into Chicago. Now, at 20 years of age, he's going to run a sub, whatever he's going to run. He's certainly going to run a sub 210, possibly a 2:08, 2:09. The course record is going to be well stood. It's the 4th fastest time in history. It's 2:07.13, set back in 1985 by Steve Jones in that remarkable solo effort that he did here in Chicago.
There's no way he'll catch that. If he had, he'd win an extra $50,000. But I mean, it's still, this is exactly what we'd hope for, Tony, that somebody would emerge like this.
Again, the history.
Alejandro Cruz has done that.
Tony,
yes, Nancy.
Tony, Bob Wright's son, Tabor, picked me up at the airport, and he said, well, I'm glad there's just one of you, because when I came earlier to pick up the 6 members of the Mexican contingent that were coming in, there were 14 of them. And he had to arrange all sorts of extra transportation because they weren't expecting as many runners to come in from Mexico City.
Well, Mexicans usually come when they're ready to run. It's a lot like the Soviet contingent. Some countries, like the Americans, we send a lot of athletes to the games, but the East Germans and the Soviets and people have a tendency to send who they think is ready to run well. There were only a couple of men distance runners from the Mexican team on the Mexican team at the Seoul Olympics. There weren't 3 men at the 5,000 meters and 3 different men at the 10,000 meters. They had 2 guys, Arturo Barrios and Mauricio Gonzalez, running both the 5 and 10,000 meters. No tourists, just athletes. He's tired now, but he doesn't have very far to go, and now he's going to try to break 2:09.
Now he is definitely struggling, but
God bless him.
Big surprise there, right? I mean, he's at the end of a 26.2-mile run.
He's working hard, though. I mean, he wants every second out of this baby he can possibly take. You never know when your PR is going to come, do you, Greg?
No, you really don't. And it comes on a day where it's competitive, where the whole field is fast. And I think you found that today. You have one guy coming in probably up by 20 seconds, but still, it was a group effort early on. These guys were running fast and competing. And I think that's the kind of race that was set up here, to bring a bunch of guys in of equal ability. One guy is going to emerge the winner, but it's going to set up a fast race.
Tim, this is also a very proud moment for Chicago's Mexican community watching this fella come in. It's got to be.
All right, now we're looking at Tolstakov trying to catch him here. And there's no way he's going to do it. You notice Cruz egging on the crowd a little bit.
What? Egging on the crowd?
Well, no, he's going like this. Or else he had a fly in his hand.
Tolstakov is looking really good, too. But I'll tell you, this young man, 20 years old, is now just 100 meters away from the tape. The clock is unofficial. He's got a good chance to break 2 hours and 9 minutes. He's got 50 meters left to go.
And here
20 years old from Mexico City. Alejandro Cruz wins the old-style marathon in 2:08.56 unofficially. A 5-minute personal best.
And here comes Tolstakov, the Soviet, who will finish second.
His personal best coming in 2 hours, 10 minutes, and 48 seconds.
And he will better that.
Yakov Tolstakov, he's from Siberia. He's used to the cold weather. He hits the line in 2:09.20 unofficially. And here comes Richard Katang from Ames, Iowa, out of Kenya. With his new son in hand, September 24th. 3rd place at the old-style marathon, 2:09.39.
got a dream, I got a dream, comes from the heart of the heartland. I can make my dream, cause I take my dream right from the heart of the heartland. Right from the heart of the heartland.
Is what he's got. He's got less than 30 seconds to go to make it. The clock is in sight.
Salazar and Beardsley, and Beardsley's closing. Al's running out.
Changing nothing for Los Angeles. They're going for the win. They're going for the win.
Not far to go now. Sal's trying to go by. What a race.
Incredible athletic performances. Got 30 seconds left for world record performance.
The road race of the month, presented by Foot Locker, America's most complete athletic footwear store. The summer's heat is arriving late in the great Northwest, but the heat is sure to be felt full force on the roads as the City of Roses plays host to the road race of the month. There's Kenya's Ibrahim Hussein, New York City and Boston Marathon champion. Steve Spence of Pennsylvania, training in Boulder, Colorado, runner-up in last month's Bloomsday 12K in Spokane. Aurora Cunha of Portugal, two-time world champion at 15K on the roads. There's Utah's Ed Eyestone. He's got the fastest 10K track time in the nation so far at 89. Number 4, Rolando Vera of Ecuador, the 87 Cascade runoff champion. An apprehension written all over the face of Lisa Weidenbach of Washington, the American record holder at 15K. One of the favorites in the race, Alejandro Cruz of Mexico, the national Mexican record holder in the marathon. So we're just about ready for the 1989 Cascade runoff 15K.
There goes the start, the 12th annual Cascade runoff.
$15K of racing at its best after this.
It's overcast and there's a little bit of a light drizzle, so I think it's pretty close to ideal conditions.
There we see our dense early lead pack, and they're going slightly uphill, but this first mile is really the flattest part of the course. There's John Sinclair and Ed Eyestone, two top Americans. We spoke with Eyestone about the strategy on this course.
Well, obviously you have to hang with whoever pushes the pace early going up the hills, because if you let anyone get away from you going up the hills, they're just going to have so much that they put on you once they start going downhill and you're still going up the hill, that there's going to be no chance of catching them. And so I think you've got to basically hang, be tough going up the hills, and then, you know, let it all hang out and going down that hill. I need a win. I need a win here.
Eyestone's been second in his last 3 races, beaten just last weekend by Ibrahim Hussein in Middletown, New York.
First 5 miles of this course are all uphill, and I think that most of the runners here are going to have the strategy of wanting to expend as little energy as possible. I've always felt that it's impossible to win a race in the uphills. All you can do is lose the race in the uphills. The more energy you put into fighting a hill, the more it's going to take out of you. So I think most of these runners are going to just try and stay with the lead pack, try and make it as easy as possible, and then once they start coming down the backside, once they're running downhill, that's when you start seeing them try and pull away.
It's a course which essentially requires strength but rewards speed at the end. Hussein in the lead. In the Reebok colors, red, white, blue, right in the middle of your screen, Marcus Barreto from Mexico, the national record holder from his country at 15 kilometers. A who's who, really, of the running world.
running his
Here's our first mile split. 10 seconds off record pace, but remember, in the old days, they used to go out a lot faster and then die a little bit at the end. Nowadays in road racing, it's more of an even pace the whole way.
It's incredible when you think of it, that for 9.3 miles, they are going to average somewhere close to 4:33 per mile. That's a fast time on the track, let alone going up these steep hills and then down the hills on the other side.
Still 20, 25 guys in that lead pack. There's no one real favorite in the race today. No one horse out there. There's 19 nations represented, 10 Mexicans, 4 Ecuadorians, 3 Colombians, 9 New Zealanders. Al, that tells me all these guys train on hills and train at altitude. Perfect for this course.
The combination of training at altitude and training on hills is the most strenuous form of distance running that you can do. So for these runners to come and run on these hills here is probably a lot easier than what they're used to back at home.
Going down just a little bit, but don't be deceived. They're going to go screaming uphill or screaming uphill. Talk about screaming. There is Alejandro Cruz, number 7 from Mexico, the winner of the Chicago Marathon last year, second this April at the Rotterdam Marathon. Leonardo Reyes, number 26, his countryman, and John Sinclair coming right along with him. We know that Cruz is a very strong uphill runner, probably the strongest uphill runner in the field, and he's going to push hard all the way through the 5-mile mark, because that's to his best advantage. Here we see downtown Southwest Broadway's the street, and 7,500 runners strung out in the first. From Ecuador, the 2 strong hill runners doing the point work, doing all the pushing. And it's begun to rain on Terwilliger, and rain hard. Rolando Vera's Cascade victory was his first major U.S. win. He went on to win the Falmouth Road Race later that year, had a great 87 season.
At 5 kilometers, the runners are 15:04. That's a pace of about 4:50 per mile. From here to the finish, though, it'll pick up dramatically. This will probably run somewhere around 4:25 per mile. Cruz, prior to the race, said that he was going to press the pace whenever they hit any flat or downhill sections. Apparently, he's doing that right now.
Back in town before Terwilliger, it hasn't begun to rain yet, which is typical Northwest weather. We'll probably go through sunshine and rain about 3 times. The whole pack been broken up. We talked to Cruz about his best chances to win today.
Alejandro was saying that if it's possible, he'd like to pull away early. If it isn't, then he'll have to concentrate on his finishing kick. Preferably, he'll try and escape from the rest of the runners somewhere in the middle parts of the race.
As the rain just continues to pour out of the sky, the only problem with the Cruz strategy is that Vera's got the same playbook. The only guy that's still potentially in it, I think, is Steve Spence. He's the speed guy in that crowd. Icestone and Garcia in 4th and 5th place. But Cruz, cruising. As they're past the top of Terwilliger, and now, even though there's a few rollers, most of the uphill's over.
Here's a good shot of Ed Icestone using that downhill to his advantage. As you can see, he's got a nice forward lean. He's not braking, landing back on his heels. He's letting that hill work to his advantage.
Still in town, the masses have during its uphill, in stark contrast to the women working uphill, of the boys hammering the downs. With Steve Spence trying to reattach himself to the Vera Cruz assault team up front. Cascade 89 continues in a minute.
He thinks that will be a very big advantage for him because he trains at altitude, especially an advantage when he comes down to sea level to race.
Well, the key is to be relaxed going up the hill so that you can make a response at the top. As soon as we get to the top of the hill, you'll be able to tell who's going to win. If someone responds to the initial surge at the top, then they have a chance to win. If you can't respond at the top, there's no way to come back.
Spence has responded beautifully so far, never once challenging Cruz and Vera on the hills, and now, as they head downtown for the last 3.5 miles, he's got himself in position. Alberto, it's form check time.
We've got a real contrast in styles here. We have Cruz with a traditional marathon runner style, sitting back a little bit, landing back on his heels. We've got Spence, more the orthodox track runner, running very smooth and easy, bouncing along, up on his toes. And then we've got Vera, a mixture of the two, having to really turn his arms and legs over much harder and faster than the others because of his shorter height.
Look at Cruz, Alberto. He's got no back kick whatsoever. Almost looks like he's very tight, whereas Spence, I mean, sitting so pretty. I mean, sitting back on it. Oh, he just stumbled a little bit going around that turn, but that is the last turn on the course. It's 3.5 miles or so to the finish line from this point. But Spence looks like he can sort of sit down and drive anytime he wants. He's like dialed in.
One of the keys to watch for here is the arm swing. As you can see, Spence is hardly moving his arms at all, whereas the other two are pumping their arms much faster. That means when it comes down to a final kick, usually the runner who could still swing his arms harder than he has been is going to be able to turn his legs over faster as well.
And right with Aurora Cunha behind Lisa Weidenbach, the tall gentleman in exactly the same Portuguese colors, Joaquim Mesquita, who is Aurora Cunha's husband. We might have like a traditional pacing problem going on here right now. We'll have to let that play out a little bit. Right now, Weidenbach does have the lead and is extending it ever so slightly as she's still on Terwilliger. And if the rain is going to affect anyone positively, it's going to be Lisa Weidenbach. In 1980, while she was still a student at the University of Michigan, she was an Olympic trials finalist as a swimmer in the 400-meter individual medley.
Now with just about 2.5 miles to go, we can see that Spence is starting to move up and really position himself for that last drive to the finish.
10K in 29:14, Alberto. That means they average around 4:33 for that second 5K. And right now they're running under 4:20 per mile.
As you can see, it's raining cats and dogs out there, but rain really isn't a factor at this point in the race. It's warm enough that the rain probably isn't tightening up their muscles at all.
Here's the man with the flag. If he unfurls it, he probably can't stay with Lisa Weidenbach. This is as impressive as she has ever been. Issaquah, Washington is her home, and she is not only on course record pace, set back in 1983 by Greta White, but she's beating the likes of Aurora Cunha, two-time world champion at this distance. And there's no doubt that this is pace. Less than a mile to go at the 1989 Cascade Runoff 15K. We've had this same threesome. Vera, Cruz, and Spence since the top of Terwilliger Hill. Now they've got less than 4 minutes of running left, with Vera doing the pushing, Cruz right behind. But Alberto, Spence sitting pretty even after a 4:13 mile. Does he look as good as he looks?
He looks great. Spence has run probably the smartest race of his life up to now. He's let the other two continually hammer away at each other, and he's just sat back there and run a nice even pace. He looks like a cat waiting to pounce.
Vera seems to sense it. Cruz biding his time a little bit. His head is really starting to turn. Cruz has done all the work, Alberto. Is he the one most likely to tire?
He's a strong and experienced runner, so I don't think he's going to tire.
Weidenbach has got the lead. And now we're going under Hawthorne Bridge, the first of the two bridges in this final stretch.